Hello, and welcome. So, why did the US invade Libya? You see, to truly understand why the United States invaded Libya in 2011, we can't just start with the war itself. We have to go back decades to who Muammar Gaddafi was and what Libya represented to the world. Gaddafi came to power in 1969 through a bloodless coup, overthrowing the Western-backed King Idris. He was young, charismatic, and presented himself as a revolutionary, a man who wanted to free Libya from foreign control. At the time, most of North Africa was still heavily influenced by Western powers, especially Britain and the United States. From the very beginning, Gaddafi's rule stood out because he dared to challenge the West. He nationalized Libya's massive oil industry, kicking out foreign companies that had controlled the country's resources for decades. He used that oil wealth to build hospitals, schools, roads, and homes. By the early 2000s, Libya had one of the highest standards of living in all of Africa. Education was free, healthcare was free. Even newlywed couples received financial support from the government to start their lives. For many Libyans, life under Gaddafi was stable, even prosperous though not free. You see, Gaddafi ruled with an iron hand. He crushed dissent, imprisoned opponents, and created a surveillance system that made it almost impossible to speak against him. But internationally, his role was far more complicated. For years, Gaddafi was captured near his hometown of Sirte and killed in the most brutal way imaginable. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was informed during an interview, and her reaction became infamous. She laughed and said, "We came, we saw, he died." For a moment, the world celebrated. Western governments called it a victory for democracy, but the celebration didn't last long. Without Gaddafi's control, Libya collapsed into chaos. Rival militias seized different parts of the country. Terrorist groups like ISIS moved in. The nation that once had free education and healthcare became a war-torn land of poverty, violence, and division. Over a decade later, Libya still has no single unified government. Even more tragic is how the invasion rippled across Africa. Thousands of weapons from Gaddafi's stockpiles flooded into neighboring countries, fueling wars in Mali, Chad, and Niger. Refugee routes expanded, and thousands of migrants began risking their lives crossing the Mediterranean to Europe. What had started as a humanitarian mission ended up destabilizing an entire region. Looking back, even US leaders admitted their mistake. Barack Obama later said that failing to plan for what came after Gaddafi's fall was the worst mistake of his presidency. But for many analysts, the real mistake wasn't the lack of planning, it was the invasion itself. They argue that it wasn't about saving civilians at all. It was about maintaining control over resources, over trade routes, and over political influence in North Africa. Before 2011, Libya was on track to lead Africa toward independence from Western financial systems. After 2011, it became a fragmented state, dependent on foreign powers. The dream of a gold-backed African currency disappeared, replaced by IMF loans and foreign debt. And that's the hidden truth behind the invasion. It wasn't simply about Gaddafi's brutality or human rights. It was about power. Every war has its public reason and its private reason. Publicly, it was about humanitarian aid. Privately, it was about ensuring that no leader could threaten Western dominance in Africa again. So, when you hear people say, "Why did the US invade Libya?" remember this. It wasn't just a war against a dictator. It was a war against an idea. The idea of a self-reliant Africa, of independence from global control. Gaddafi's fall marked the end of that vision and the beginning of a decade of chaos that Libya still hasn't escaped. In the end, the story of Libya isn't just about bombs or oil. It's about how far powerful nations will go to preserve their influence, and how one man's dream of a united continent was erased in the name of freedom. That was it for now. See you later in another video. Until then, like and subscribe.